Hello, everyone, and welcome. This is the second in our five-part Interagency Working Group on Cooperative Development webinar series for 2023. This group is the Local and Regional Foods group that is meeting on June 30th, the final day of National Home Ownership Month. We had a webinar on housing cooperatives. And if you were not able to be there live, it has been recorded and is available. Another item is that we have a website at USDA for the Interagency Working Group on Cooperative Development. We invite you to go ahead, visit that website, and please give us feedback because this is an iterative process and we look forward to adding additional materials. Please share materials that you would like to share with the co-op community, along with any suggestions that you have. So without further ado, I am going to turn it over to our moderator, Ms. Debbie Rausch.
Good afternoon, everyone, and we're very pleased to have you join us and very excited about the program that we have today. We have lots of different viewpoints of the local food system and some innovative things that are going on that we want to share with you, and some resources at the very tail end that will perhaps be helpful as you look at local food projects in your area. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our administrator, Dr. Karama Neal, who's our administrator for Rural Business and Co-op Services. Dr. Neal?
Thank you so much, Deborah, and all of you. I really appreciate everyone being here today, and excited about your participation in this food sector subcommittee meeting. It is an honor to address this gathering, particularly given the recent significant increase in food-specific programs at the Rural Business Cooperative Service and the ongoing use of our existing programs for food projects. We are so pleased to have many of our partner organizations join us here, both within and outside of federal government. The 2014 Farm Bill authorized the Secretary of Agriculture to chair this working group to ensure coordination on cooperative development among federal agencies and private sector organizations. We're pleased to have such an important role in supporting cooperative development across the country. Cooperatives generate jobs, bring needed goods and services to people, especially when there are market failures, and are resilient in economic downturns. They operate in all areas of the economy: agriculture, utilities, food service, energy, financial services, insurance, construction, housing, healthcare, education, and so much more. Statistics that we keep on agricultural cooperatives, many of which are food producers, are involved in the food supply chain, show that 76% have been in existence for 50 years or more. This level of resiliency is particularly important given today's economic, health, and other shocks. Cooperatives of all forms, worker co-ops, producer co-ops, and consumer co-ops, among others, remain an important business form because they facilitate resiliency and can weather such shocks. The member patrons of the cooperatives own, finance, and use democratic control for the cooperatives. Financial benefits from the cooperative's business remain with the member patrons in the form of patronage refunds and therefore stay in the local community where the members live. Since cooperatives are democratic organizations whose members have a voice in how the business is run, cooperatives produce creative solutions, particularly in times of crisis. In the case of worker cooperatives, members can change their operations or opt to take smaller paychecks rather than dismiss workers or go out of business. Farmers can change how they market or process their produce. Cooperative grocers can rely on relationships with locally sourced producers and flexibly address supply chain issues. And cooperative retailers can move quickly to take advantage of e-commerce. These values and flexibilities allow cooperatives to fill market gaps. Broadband, rural, grocery, electric, and pharma cooperatives are examples of businesses that address community needs that might otherwise go unmet. We have convened this meeting today to foster cooperative development and ensure coordination with federal agencies and national and local cooperative organizations that have programs and interests that are relevant to cooperatives. We hope this group can seize this opportunity to make the programs across the federal government better known and understood, and bring people within and outside of government together for even greater synergy and cooperative development. We're excited that you're here, and we look forward to the conversation. So now I'm pleased to welcome Gray Harris, who is the Senior Advisor for Food Systems Finance. Gray?
Thanks, Dr. Neal. Hello, everyone. I'm super excited to be here today with you. As Dr. Neal mentioned, cooperatives create wealth in communities and opportunities for ownership and building equity, and they elevate and empower singular voices to a critical mass of voices that can be heard. You know, cooperatives also help level the playing field in all industries, as Dr. Neal said, but in particular, we see this in food systems. And that's very much aligned with our USDA goals to improve farmer incomes, increase competition, and create more new and better market opportunities for producers, especially the small and mid-scale producers. We've heard this time and time again, all of this contributing to a strengthened food supply chain resiliency, which is so critical to support agricultural production and a food system that feeds all people. So I'm pretty excited about this session. I'm really curious to hear what and how the panelists identify the challenges of the moment and how cooperatives can provide possible solutions in the future and have provided solutions in the past. You know, some of the questions that run through my mind that panelists may or may not address, but we do see this in cooperative activity around the country is that, you know, if cooperatives, for instance, provide access to markets for small and mid-scale farms that are otherwise reserved for the bigger players that are otherwise shut out, then how do we address the challenge of volume versus scale so that farmers get the price they need and deserve for their products and consumers get food that is healthy, sustainable, and affordable, feeding as many people as possible? So how can cooperatives contribute to greater food supply chain resiliency? Another question, having spent a number of years working with rural grocers in Maine, I do know that cooperative ownership by employees and members is a viable succession plan for a lot of rural grocery stores that would otherwise shut down. So how do we effectively provide the TA and other capacity building resources to ensure their success? And what in particular challenges do rural grocers face that need specific and targeted assistance? And what has worked? What have we seen has worked? And finally, if cooperatives are a path, and we know they are, to wealth creation for people in communities that have suffered the greatest disinvestment, how do we make sure we provide the tools and resources to lift up those communities that are the hardest to reach? And how can cooperatives be a solution? Where do we see evidence of that? You know, for this entire conversation, it's really helpful to have a framework for local and regional foods to understand the context of where all this work takes place. So I'm really thrilled that my colleagues from AMS are here to talk about the local and regional food activity, in particular at USDA, but also because of that research, what's happening across the country. So Debbie, I'll pass it back to you now to introduce you to the next speaker. And thank you again for having me here.
Thank you. Great. We appreciate everybody's insights and setting the stage for us as we get started. And the next speaker is Juliana Arnett, and she is with AMS, and she is a senior marketing specialist. And she's going to share a little bit about the local regional food systems and how that affects the food system overall. So, Juliana?
Great. Thanks. Hello, everyone. Thanks for having me. As mentioned, I'm the Local and Regional Food System Senior Marketing Specialist at USDA Agriculture Marketing Service. In plain language, that means I support interagency coordination around local and regional food systems here at the USDA. Next slide, please. My position is located at USDA AMS, as we call it for short, due to the agency's unique role in local and regional food systems at the department. AMS focuses on the development of international and domestic market opportunities. This includes local and regional food markets. At the USDA, each of the department's 29 agencies and offices play a different role in achieving the USDA's mission from food and nutrition to natural resources and rural development. Similarly, the USDA's agencies and offices play different roles in contributing to local and regional food systems. Here at AMS, we serve as an internal and external convener of all of those agencies and offices. We also act as a researcher and a data provider, technical assistance provider, and funder for local and regional food systems. Recently, we have also started to play a role as a local food purchaser. Next slide. The USDA has steadily supported local and regional food systems since the 1970s. This slide highlights just a few key spotlights on how this work has grown over time. Typically, when we talk about this work, we start with the Farmer to Consumer Direct Marketing Act of 1976. The act promoted the development and expansion of direct markets for two key reasons. One, direct markets offer producers a greater share of the food dollar or increased financial returns. Two, they lower the cost and increase the quality of food consumers. I think with the pandemic, it also became very evident the impact local and regional food systems have on a community's ability to quickly pivot and access food among supply chain disruptions. I think that you'll find also many of the stakeholders that are engaged in local and regional food systems development, like those that we'll share later today, share shared values with cooperatives, and it's a great opportunity for these two to come together and support one another. Today, the Farm Bill includes more than $648 million in programs and resources to support local and regional foods, and this is led to over $9 billion in sales for local and regional foods. This work is continuing to evolve at the USDA as we understand the importance of local and regional food systems. Next slide, please. As I mentioned earlier, during COVID-19, it exposed many vulnerabilities in our food systems at almost every level, social, structural, and environmental. We recognize the need to adapt to meet the challenges of our time, from climate to concentration. Throughout the pandemic, we heard from stakeholders nationwide that they needed more right-sized infrastructure and equipment to build local and regional food systems and address supply chain bottlenecks. We also heard the need for technical assistance, value chain coordination, and programs and services that really address equity. Last summer, the Secretary announced the USDA Food Systems Transformation, which aims to build a more resilient food supply chain, create a fairer food system, make nutritious food more accessible and affordable for consumers, and make equity central to all we do. The stakeholder feedback was used to inform a portfolio of programs that address critical needs and strengthen the supply chain from end to end. As you can see, there are programs in production, processing, aggregation, and markets. Overall, there are more than 50 programs associated with the food systems transformation, addressing needs across the supply chain, providing additional funds to existing programs that help shore up food systems and building resiliency. And then we also established many new programs, which you'll see highlighted here in red. While I can't share about each of these programs today, I did want to quickly mention 4 important networks that are part of the food system transformation. And I'm specifically highlighting these networks due to the approachable connection and human scale support they offer to individuals and organizations interested in navigating USDA's many funding, resources, and technical assistance. Next slide. The first I will quickly mention, as more will be shared later throughout the program, but the Rural Partners Network is an alliance of over 20 federal agencies and many civic partners working to expand rural prosperity through job creation, infrastructure development, and community improvement. While the network doesn't exclusively work on local and regional food systems, it is one of the economic development strategies, and you'll hear how communities across the country are using this to address local and regional food systems and economic development in their backyards. Next slide. The Transition to Organic Partnership Program is a $100 million 5-year initiative that will support organic transition in 6 regions across the U.S. The TOP program, as we call it for short, provides farmer-to-farmer mentoring, technical assistance, community development, workforce development, and data and reporting. The program helps transitioning and organic producers overcome technical, cultural, and market shifts during and after the transition period, and it also supports human capital across the organic industry through targeted workforce development. Next slide. USDA's Meat and Poultry Processing Capacity Technical Assistance Program ensures that participants in USDA's Meat and Poultry Supply Chain Initiative have access to a full range of technical assistance resources to support not only their project development, but also their project success. Through MPPTA, the USDA established a nationwide network with 7 cooperators to help folks navigate and manage federal grant management, business development and financial planning, meat and poultry processing technical and operation support, such as processing plant development and workforce development, and supply chain development, such as building relationships between suppliers, processors, distributors, and customers. And I saw that Sarah Hernandez from MPPTA is on the line today. Next slide. Last but not least, over the past 2 years, stakeholders have shared a need for more coordinated and comprehensive services from the USDA to build technical assistance and capacity building for small and mid-sized food and farm businesses and the development of the middle of the supply chain. So the new USDA Regional Food Business Centers will be the cornerstone of our efforts to support local and regional food systems in order to create a more resilient, fair, and equitable food system. Each of the 12 regions are led by a network of partnerships, engaging with grassroots food and farm organizations and employing a range of creative strategies to build food systems resiliency. These partnerships provide nationwide coverage, including a national intertribal food business center. The centers have 3 main functions: coordination, technical assistance, and capacity building, with the goal of supporting small and mid-sized food and farm businesses, including cooperatives. The centers will support producers and food businesses navigating and accessing federal, state, and local resources, support value chain coordination, business planning and technical assistance, and business builder awards up to $100,000 to help producers and businesses wherever they are to grow and strengthen their food and farm businesses. Next slide. These are just a few of the newest resources available from the USDA as part of the food systems transformation. But as I mentioned, agencies and offices across the USDA are supporting local and regional food systems. Some of these programs are designed specifically for local food systems, while others can support a variety of producers and projects, including those focused on local markets. In an effort to make it easier to navigate and find our programs, we have created this resource or resource sheet, such as the USDA programs in the local food supply chain. Next slide. But if there's one thing that I can encourage you to take away from today, it is you can find all these resources online. These are the key resources to find what the USDA has to offer. We have the Food Systems Transformation website that outlines all of our programs and is regularly updated. We also have the USDA programs in the local food supply chain fact sheet. And you can find out more about AMS resources to support local and regional foods, including the regional food business centers, at our website. And you can sign up for our monthly our newsletter on what's happening in local foods at AMS and the USDA. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Juliana, for that overview of the local food system and things that are out there that could be of assistance. And now we want to hear from some innovative folks on the practitioner side of it, folks that boots in the ground, if you will. And the first speaker that we have is Josh Miner, and he handles the animal procurement and direct-to-consumer sales for the Wisconsin Grass-Fed Beef Cooperative. And he's worn many hats over the course of this working life. Most of them have been closely tied to strengthening the local food system and family and farm economies and regenerative agriculture. And then following him, we will have Leslie Schaller, who's the Director of Programs for AceNet. And she has been heavily involved in distribution channels and cooperatives and how those two meet along the lines. And then lastly, we will hear from Sean Park, who's the Program Manager for Western Illinois University, and some really innovative ways that they're looking at the grocery retail end of it. So we've got a little chunk from each of the sections of the local food economy. So with that, I'm going to kick it off. And Josh, I'll toss it to you.
Hi, thanks so much for having me. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time describing what I do because I think I just got a really excellent overview of where we fit. Like Debbie said, I am the animal procurement manager for the Wisconsin Grass-Fed Beef Cooperative, and we are a member-owned cooperative that's trying to operationalize some of these challenges. The cooperative has been in existence in the state of Wisconsin for going on 15 years now. We have over 250 active member owners, and we are a marketing cooperative. So our mission is to increase the market diversity and marketing opportunities for our members, many of whom, or most of whom, started or continue to direct market their own grass-fed beef and pasture-based pork products. But our cooperative, under the brand name Wisconsin Meadows, allows them to pool their animals when they're interested throughout the course of the year, and have them processed at various state and now USDA inspected facilities, most notably in Cannon Falls, Minnesota, Lawrence Meats, which has been a recipient of many USDA grants for innovation and expansion in the meat processing sector. But as a result of our partnerships, we are able to process our members' animals into a variety of retail ready, typically understood products that consumers will find at the retail level. We also do some direct to consumer sales. Last year, we moved over 1,000 animals through our very, I'll say small but resilient supply chain. And so over 50 of our members were able to sell their animals in a way that increased their own farms' economic diversity and their own economic security. So we're kind of trying to increase market penetration for smaller scale beef and pork producers in Wisconsin in a way that still stays true to our underlying mission of animal husbandry, natural meat production, and regenerative agriculture.
Thanks, Josh. Next is Leslie Schaller.
Good afternoon, everyone. I hope my audio is working all right. Good high sign for Debbie. I'm so delighted to be with you all here today. I see a lot of familiar faces and names in the listing. Great turnout also for Friday, and just a lot of appreciation for my long-term friend and colleague, Debbie Rausch, for inviting me here today. So I'm going to share a little bit about AceNet's journey along the way in terms of cooperative development. And I am wondering, I am not seeing my slides on the screen. So is that just me, or is that everyone else? There they are. Wonderful. So I am with the Appalachian Center for Economic Networks. We're a regional entrepreneurship and economic development organization in Athens, Ohio. I really came into the world of cooperative development as an undergraduate in the early 1970s in going to Ohio University in Athens, Ohio, and I became a member of a consumer co-op, which was the Athens Food Co-op. Lamentably no longer alive, but it really turned me on to how cooperatives can really make a difference, particularly, I think, in underserved rural communities. So AceNet focuses on building networks, supporting innovation, facilitating collaboration with Appalachia's Ohio businesses to create a strong, sustainable regional economy. Next slide. So just a little bit about us, 38 years and counting. Our mission is really to grow the regional economy by supporting entrepreneurs and strengthening economic sectors. We work in multiple sectors here in Appalachia, Ohio, and throughout Central Appalachia. But all our work for the last 38 years has been particularly grounded within local and regional food systems. And I think, Juliana talked about how do we build more resilient economies in which all people have the resources and opportunities to prosper. So you'll notice many of you are familiar probably with my previous presentations. This work is driven so much by people and place, I think especially in local food and ag. So you'll always see a lot of photos of our food and farm entrepreneurs in all my slideshows, because these folks are the ground troops. This is, I think, what motivates many of us to start our day and do this work. It's obviously the real engine that animates our local food systems. Next slide. So our humble beginnings, I think, in the cooperative approach, AceNet started back in 1985 as the worker-owned network. So we were really destined to look at some of the models we had been learning about, particularly from the Mondragon region, the Basque region of Spain, to figure out how could we create, again, multi-sector network of worker-owned businesses. And that's the movement I really come out of. Full disclosure, aside from my position as the Director of Programs at AceNet, I'm also the founder and the business director. I think I can brag on us. We're probably the largest worker-owned restaurant, definitely in the state of Ohio and possibly the Midwest, and maybe even nationally, who knows? We're about 54 strong at the moment. But I think what we learned in these early days as the worker-owned network was that worker ownership was a great model within our cooperative development values, but it was only one piece of the puzzle. For us to really accelerate the growth, to build, particularly in our local food economy, more resilience, we needed to look at other tools that were out there. So in the mid-90s, we started to develop food processing facilities. Our Food Ventures facility opened in 1996. Again, one of the longest running. You know, back in the day, we called those kitchen incubators. I tend to call them food enterprise centers right now, because we always have a diverse ecosystem of tenants, clients, and users using our facilities. We also have another 100,000 square foot facility in our northern part of Athens County in Nelsonville, and about 20,000, maybe even close to 25,000 square feet of that facility has become a much larger distribution hub. We have just recently installed another much larger thermal processing room in that space, and also have dedicated meat processing and sort of a veg prep, although it's morphing into more processing options. So as some of our folks get started in the Food Ventures Center, it might be a farmer doing a value-added product. It might be the formation of more collaboration between some of our entrepreneurs, maybe using more of a network for co-packing or for processing. And I think what this has really led to is, and I saw Marissa, Christy from K-Card is also on the line with us today, is looking at some of these models and how, as partners throughout Central Appalachia, we can help replicate and really learn from our peers doing this work. So leading to regional cooperation, I think, is really grounded in the cooperative principles of all the work that AceNet and our partners have engaged in. If you're not familiar with the Central Appalachian Network, I would encourage you to check us out. I'll put the link here in the chat in a little bit, but it's cannetwork.org. And we are so thrilled right now to be one of the collaboratives that was chosen for the regional food business centers. So we're just getting started. July 1, we've been having a lot of group meetings and look for a lot of continued opportunities to not just instill cooperative values, but look at really the formation of some newer collaborative models. Next slide. So again, always respectful, always acknowledging. You know, I think part of being a co-op member, especially in a worker-owned business for over 38 years now, I really recognize that we're in this work together, that co-design is essential, and that we have to animate these values at all points in time. So a big shout out to our founders, Marty, June Holly, Roger Wilkins, and just the level of collaboration and cooperation that has grown throughout Athens County, throughout southeastern Ohio, and now through southeastern and central Appalachia has really made the difference. So whether it's modeling shared use facilities like kitchen incubators, enterprise centers, food hubs, whether it's developing cooperative branding programs, or just looking at new innovations to really address the food insecurity throughout rural places in Appalachia, like our Veggie Van, one of the projects of the Appalachian Accessible Food Network. So next slide. So what have we taken away? I think we recognize that to be viable, we've needed to secure a mix of funding. So thankfully we've been able to secure revenue from operations of many of these worker-owned businesses and other models. Philanthropy has always been at the table. And I think public and private investment, although at times it waxes and wanes, has also been particularly important. And then for us at AceNet, network weaving is at the core of our methodology. So building networks, connecting people to resources, making maybe some of those weaker links stronger ties. And then measuring impact, obviously, when we're funded by our grant investors, we have to make sure that we're accountable with our deliverables. But I think measuring impacts that go beyond those traditional economic development key measures has also been essential to our work. So I would encourage you, if you're not familiar with the WealthWorks framework, check it out. It's been throughout Central Appalachia a great way for us to measure our work and really see if we're ringing true with a lot of cooperative values. People and places, they're at the table with us. They're often the spark plugs. They're the co-designers. Social enterprise throughout Central Appalachia is emulating a lot of the same cooperative values that legally governed co-ops utilize. But I think, there's a morphing here. Innovation within regional food systems, I really think accelerates and is driven through collaboration. So we travel at the speed of trust. Networks and co-ops are really important in building that backbone of relationships that really make things hum. And then on the horizon, we recently, or not that recently, I guess we're at the end of year 3 in one of our collaborative awards to Appalachian Sustainable Development, KCARD, AceNet, many other partners like Coalfield Development in West Virginia are also involved. But one of my dreams has been, how do we really address some of the gaps in production, processing, and distribution? So looking at co-op models, perhaps, where the practitioners, especially the food hubs and the collaborative facilities, begin to form cooperatives as maybe the first tier of membership, but then also how do we add our other partners, our producers, maybe even producer associations or some of our larger food processors and manufacturers as partners. And then, boy, I really wish we could get the market partners to be a little more committed in co-op development and design as well. So next slide. So challenges, still significant underinvestment. Co-ops are still confusing. Collaboration is tough. I think we're still struggling with that. We love WealthWorks because it helps us translate other returns on investment. We can demonstrate how social capital, natural capital, intellectual capital, really has an impact in innovating within more traditional food systems. And then where we work here in southeastern Ohio, all the partnerships we have throughout Appalachia, You know, there's just a lot of challenges, and thank you, USDA and many other agencies in the larger federal family, understanding that rural places have not been invested in. A lot of low wealth communities are still struggling. We struggle with capital, technology, infrastructure, and then we just need more investment in capacity building and leadership. And this is one of the many reasons I'm so excited to participate in the next 5 years in the Regional Food Business Center model. Next slide. This is Leslie on her soapbox. I have to leave you all with some thoughts in terms of what happens when we embrace co-op values. We are stronger. We feel more connected. You know, food security is significantly addressed. Communities learn how to build for innovation. And I think the byproduct of this is systems become more resilient. We respect the needs of the next generation and the generations to come. So we have to build out a fair food system if we are going to continue to thrive. And that's it for me. One next slide, how to get hold of us. This is the shameless AceNet infomercial. Go to AceNet Works. You can find all our staff addresses there. Please, please, please follow us on social media. If you want to hear more, if you want to see more of the animation of this work, follow us on our social media platforms, but also maybe register for our monthly e-newsletter. It's great. Megan Loveland, our communications and program director, does an amazing job. It just came out yesterday. So thanks all. Thanks, Debbie.
Thanks, Leslie. That reminds me of getting a lot of feedback. Okay. Okay, there we go. Oh, maybe not. Can you mute, Leslie?
Yes.
There we go. Yep, that helped. Okay, that reminds me of been recently rereading some information that Chuck Ingram, a longtime co-op developer and educator at Ohio State, put out that co-ops are people in action. And I think that's one of the things I really love about co-ops. And thanks for sharing that, Leslie. It's really neat to see the work that you guys are doing down there. And with that, I want to turn it over to another really innovative thinker and proponent for the co-op community, and that would be Sean Parks from the Western Illinois University. Sean? You might be on mute. There we go.
It was just slow unmuting. Yeah, I will try to stay within the 10-minute time limit. If anybody that knows me, once I start talking about it, I could go on forever. But yeah, so what we want to talk about a little bit today was the rural fresh markets. And that's a program we have that bases on co-ops for originally rural areas. And now we're seeing in some urban areas, but it's in food deserts. This is a program of our Project ReFed, which is Regional Food Economic Development. So we're actually looking at co-ops going back to producer co-ops, aggregation, even to shared land co-ops. So we're open to about anything, really. Next slide. Can we go to the next slide? Nope. Okay. So yes,
Sean, do I have the right side? Growth of rural. It may take a little while.
Yeah, just took a minute.
Okay.
I got it. Yes. So this problem of rural food deserts is just something that's been creeping up. You can kind of correlate that with the growth of Walmarts into the food industry. A lot of people don't know, but they weren't really into that business much until 95-ish. So you can see here, this is kind of old data, but nearly 30 million Americans reside in food deserts. K-State's numbers from 06 to 16, 45 out of 213 stores closed, and those were all in small towns. This last one kind of is special to me. So Iowa dropped from 1,400 small grocery stores in rural towns to just over 700 in 2005. And I actually ran my own grocery store just south of Iowa here from 95 to 05. So you can tell I chose a really good time to get in business. Next slide. Yeah, so we work here for it's the Illinois Co-op Development Center, but we're underneath the Illinois Institute for Rural Affairs. So we do basically community and economic development. And this kind of explains why once these stores disappear, your local economic developer or mayor can't find help to come back in. In the industry, grocery stores make about 1% profit. Buying a used one, somebody's open and running, $300,000 to $1 million. Costs $2 to $4 million to build a new store. So anybody that has that kind of money can do a much better return than really risky 1%. So it's very hard to come back in, find somebody who will open that store just based on the economics. But as we know, co-ops fill a gap that when the market won't fill it for economic reasons, that's when we turn to co-ops. Next slide.
Sean, the slide that's up is the rural fresh market model.
Okay. Well, I don't see that one. Oh, there it is. Just came through. I must have a really slow connection. So to answer some of these problems, you can't go back into these communities and try to open a co-op because the first question you're going to have is, well, why is this going to succeed when the previous one closed and the one over in that town closed? So we came up with this rural fresh market model, and we've actually been seeing some of the principles be effective in urban areas too. So we pretty much work in food deserts. One of the things is reducing our energy costs for these buildings, whether it's an existing grocery store or a new co-op. We want to make sure we have the newest efficient equipment for refrigeration we can. That's just critical. That's one thing I suggest you never buy used if you can. Anything else you can buy used, shelving or your refrigeration, got to be careful. We adjust the product mix. So a lot of rural communities haven't caught up to the different ways that we shop now. Prepared foods is a real good example of that, which leads me to incorporating new and different revenue streams. So having more of these prepared foods in these smaller stores really changes the profit mix for the store. So where the previous store couldn't do it, the co-op can, because we're making a little more money on baked goods or on deli sandwiches, things like that. And then using the community-owned or cooperative development model to reduce the financing costs. So we're raising the money locally. And the first 4 or 5 stores that I worked with didn't have any commercial loans. So that's pretty important to getting them off onto a good start. Some of the differences here, these co-ops that I start are very small and light. They cost less than $500,000 and open up in less than a year if we can. Average, if you look at food co-ops in larger cities, could be 5 to 7 years, $2 to $4 million because they're often building from scratch, whereas we're using a building that's existing. So some of the advantages here, market assessment. So with the Rural Fresh Market, we're using that co-op model, right? So our market assessment isn't based on someone coming in and looking at the market in a town of 2,500 people. We're just talking to the actual people because they become the members. So we're getting a much better market assessment of what people want. And then as we're operating, we get more community input too, which is great. If you have an entrepreneur, sometimes they don't want to approach that guy. But if it's a community project, people are more willing to voice what they'd like to see. And so every store has a different mix of the food they carry, what the colors are, what the music playing inside is, all that stuff that we love at other food co-ops. They have that, and it's very specific to their little corner of the world. Business mentorship. So we've seen some of these co-ops also be mentored and mentoring other businesses in town, which is great. You have a small food co-op, somebody wants to start a business, they can just walk in and ask, so who do you advertise with? Or how did the city deal with this? So that's helpful. And cooperative review. So the idea of in cooperatives where we're having the manager talk to the co-op board every month and then talk to the membership once a year, we're getting more eyes looking at what's going on. So in a small business, sometimes you let yourself, and I've done this, let yourself get into trouble. And then by the time you realize you need some outside help, it may be too late. In this case, hopefully we can catch problems much, much earlier. So that cooperative review is just a really good business practice. Next slide. So technical assistance, this is some of the stuff that we do. Remember, most of our communities are middle to low income. They don't have money for a market study at $10,000 or an architect at $30,000. That's when your budget's $150,000 for the whole thing. You can't really do that. So we'll do an estimate of startup costs. That includes their inventory, equipment, any miscellaneous estimates. And we actually work with food warehouses to kind of understand what they need. And then some of it's based on our experience. We'll do the cash flow and financial estimates. I hesitate to call them feasibility studies. I like to call them opportunity studies because that shows there's an opportunity there. Doesn't mean it's going to happen. Feasibility studies, we seem to think, well, it's possible, so it's a done deal. And I'm always cautious about that. You can have a great plan, a great area, have everything laid out, and if it's managed wrong, you can fail. So it's really difficult to say, here's your numbers, you're going to be successful. So I like to call it an opportunity study, but we'll do estimates for monthly for the first year, cash flow for quarterly for the next two, and then up to annual for the years 4 and 5, because further out you're predicting, less accurate you're going to be. You never know, next year you may change things. Floor plan design and assistance. So we'll kind of lay that out. I'll do a top-down kind of drawing to make sure it's ADA compliant. And we look to make sure bathrooms, things like that are ADA compliant. And then all the decorating, everything inside, the materials, that's all co-op board. They get to pick that. It's usually, you know, a lot of local craftsmen that work. We had one guy that retired from making Sarasota movie theater countertops. And so he made the countertops for our deli. Turned out really nice. Payroll and schedule planning. So that's part of that cash flow. We will actually sit down and go, okay, what hours do you want to be open? How much do you want to pay folks? Okay, here's what we think you're going to need to have in the building at that time. Here's what the unemployment insurance is. Here's what all these things that go into it, your FICA match. So here's an estimate on workers' comp, and get it as detailed as we can because every nickel counts. Business plan creation is a little different. That comes up with your mission statement, some of your principles, things like that. Sometimes we get bogged down in that and less in the business, but those are important. It really tells people what you're about. And then critical is follow-up consulting. So we want to talk to people regularly and make sure things are going well. Next slide. Some of these are
We lost Sean. He's coming back.
Yeah.
You're on mute, Sean.
There we go. Okay. May have to talk about a rural broadband cooperative as well, as I'm having trouble. Because we are a community and economic development organization, some of the key concepts we use are asset-based community development. So we're looking at what they have in the community that we can take advantage of. Maybe they have a baker that's great. Well, we won't compete. We'll work with him, sell his product when he's not open, and take a small cut there. Economic gardening. We'll work with some of these others that may be able to help us with the business and help them grow their business as well, because we grow together. And we know that the loss of the grocery store loses what we call a third space. So sometimes referred to as anchor institutions as well, but your first space is your home, your second space is your workplace, your third space is where you meet your neighbors. So this is where a lot of bridges are built. And then finally, social capital. That builds that social capital that anybody that's tried to do a co-op in a place that people just weren't invested in, that's your lack of social capital. So next slide, please. So this was our first one. It was in a tiny town of 1,700 people, which is kind of my magic number, it seems, for some reason. I land on 1,700 a lot. Winchester, Illinois. Their store had been closed. Their grocery store closed up 9 months before. This was our first project. We got to the town meeting and 80 out of 1,700 people were there, which if you do the math and try to adjust that to Cook County, that's several 100,000 people. So was really impressed, and that's that social capital there. And it was really small. You can see the picture there. The other side has the refrigerated units. The back actually has a fully certified deli, and now they have a bakery upstairs. But we're talking total of 1,500 square feet. Carries local meat only. The whole thing, soup to nuts, $89,000 invested. That's inventory, remodeling, $7,000 for an HVAC system, and the equipment. And then we did all the business training there. And most of those funds were raised by sale of shares in the cooperative. That's because in rural areas, if you have 1,700 people, you're not going to get 1,500 members. So raising money through memberships doesn't really work, especially in low income areas. So this is the last one we did. They opened up last month in Cairo, Illinois. Cairo has a poverty rate of 28%. It's about 72% Black, 26% white. Has a long history of racial violence. 60% of the residents are SNAP qualified. And the average income is about 18,000. And in our state, I believe the average is around 58,000. So it kind of gives you an idea. Next slide. So this is the building we actually went into. And some of the collaboration, when you look at it as a community development project, so the Illinois Institute for Rural Affairs, that's us, but we got help from a total of 5 colleges, all in that one building. The best way to do that, if you've ever worked with colleges, is to not let them know they're working with each other. So we eventually ended up with U of I, Southern Illinois University in Carbondale, and 2 community colleges. Lieutenant Governor's office was who actually instigated the program there. That used to be a Piggly Wiggly, and it's a very big store. So next slide. So I'm not sure how well you folks can see this, but this was a really big store. So what we did was this center section there is the grocery store. It's a 5,700 square foot grocery store. We rearranged things where they were laid out straight instead of diagonal, squared off the wall because it had been drawn at a diagonal as well. What we've been able to do to fill these spaces, so in the top left corner there, we're going to have our deli bakery, which is much bigger than most deli bakeries would be, but there's a lot of value in a lot of profit and value added items. And that was actually already fitted out with a kitchen. It was a former Subway. The bottom kind of middle right is actually 2,000 square feet that we're renting out, leasing out for $100 a month to 2 community colleges doing a workforce development program. Their rent is $100 a month, but in return, their students are learning drywall and painting and things like that. they're using their grant money to buy materials, and they're using our building as their lab. So they're remodeling different areas for us as they go. Down in the bottom left corner, that's what we're doing next. It's going to have basically a small business development center there. There'll be a workforce component for high school kids to learn embroidery and screen printing. But it's more about learning the business. A conference room for the co-op to be able to have meetings that aren't at the kitchen table. And a little area for government offices. A lot of government offices have pulled out of this town. And so this will give them a place to actually come on a rotating basis and see the folks that they're supposed to be working with. And then finally, top center is going to be a meat shop, but also a teaching kitchen up there. So it'll be able to teach moms for a Mom and Me program learning to cook. Next slide, please. And this was our grand opening. The lady in yellow there is our lieutenant governor. She's a pretty fantastic lady. She travels all over downstate Illinois. And then the gentleman with his mouth open there to the left is actually our board president, Gabriel. I'm somewhere off screen. So, but that was a really great deal. This one took longer than our others, I think 20 months altogether, but there's a lot more in that one building. And I think that's the important part about it. So yes, this Cairo Community Action, what it's done is the co-op has become a unified force for some of these things. Still a lot of board dynamics and drama like you have in any co-op board, but they're able to look at things like housing, like broadband access, hospital access, road construction as a group and present that instead of one person complaining, which is what they had. They just weren't unified. And this has allowed them to do that. In fact, we had to take a little bit of time out from the food co-op because we had a housing crisis down there. And they all said, well, we need to be at that meeting instead, which is good. And then finally, they're able to put several different groups that they represent, from school boards to city council, to the hospital area. It's a small clinic, to apply for grants together. And of course, if you've got multiple groups applying for the grant, it's a much stronger application. So I think that's it. Yeah. Sorry for all the technical difficulties. This has been a rough afternoon for Friday.
No problem. Thanks, Sean, for sharing. Now that we've had a little bit of a taste of some innovative types of things and different programs out there that you can maybe model something in your community after, we want to take a couple of minutes and share some information from our federal partners. The first up is Tracy Smith, who works with the public-private partnerships in rural development, or rural development part of rural cooperative development, business development services. I'll get it right one of these days. And she's a business and loan grant analyst and lives in Michigan and has worked for the agency for a number of years. Tracy?
Well, thank you. I am going to run real quick through some of the programs that we have. We do at Rural Development have over 40 programs, and clearly I don't have time to speak about all of them, but I picked out a few that I thought might be helpful to the group. We support rural communities with about a $50 billion investment annually, and our portfolio stands at about $220 billion. So we're a pretty large-sized facility. We do this through 47 state offices. Robbie, if you want to go to the next screen, thank you. We're set up in 4 regions with 47 state offices. There are a couple of state offices that cover 2 states, but with that we have 400 area offices. So a big positive, in my opinion, of rural development is we have people in every state that are there to help you find the right programs, figure out the best use of funds, put you in contact with the people that you otherwise may not know about. And we have lots of partners. You know, Debbie and her team are sitting on these regional food partnerships, and we are really truly there to help. So please use us as you can and think of us often. I'm going to talk about some programs and you're going to have lots of questions, and the real takeaway will be contact someone at Rural Development and we'll get you in contact with the right person for your area. So today I'm going to talk about really 4 programs, though I have 6 listed here. And that's because some of them are kind of similar. So first I'm going to talk about the 1RD Guaranteed Loan Program. That is a program where an organization, a business would go to a lender and the lender comes to us for a guarantee. So our guarantee serves as kind of much like an insurance policy to that lender, that if the business isn't successful, we help cover a lot of the costs that they would have otherwise lost that money. So it allows lenders to make loans when otherwise they may have determined it was too high of a risk. So that's why we're here and what we do and how it works. These loans can go up to $25 million, but I want to point out that they can also be for $60,000. They don't have to be these huge loans. They can be much smaller. Pretty much any type of business is eligible for these loans, from nonprofits, for-profits, cooperatives, public bodies, even sole proprietorships. So pretty much any business entity can apply for these loans. The monies can be used for purchasing a business, building a business from the ground up, buying equipment, even working capital to help get the business started during their startup period. So it's very, very broad what we can use that money for. There are some things that we can't, types of projects that we can't use the money for. And when you look through these, some of them are pretty easy to understand. Hemp is a new large crop that's out there. So there's a little asterisk there telling you if it's ingestible, anything ingestible with CBD oil in it, we can't finance that. But if you're talking about fiber, feeds, things like that, even those can get, qualify for the program. The other thing I want to bring your attention to is this program doesn't really help with agriculture production. It's post-harvest. So it's the processing of commodities or any different types of food deals, just not the actual growing. This is just an example of a guaranteed loan that was made to Cook's Venture. I'm sorry, I couldn't quite read that. To Cook's Venture. They make, or they don't make, they process chickens and poultry, beef, pork, and have a large local, I'm sorry, they have a large area where they are supplying these special products that are all 100% grass-fed, very high quality, and a network of individuals that grow these and sell through this organization. So it's really a very nice organization. The next thing I want to talk to you about is the Rural Energy for America program. This promotes energy efficiency improvements and renewable energy projects. So it's always either creating energy or reducing energy consumption. That's what our REAP program is. On the next slide, we talk about you can be, this is a little bit different eligible borrowers, grantees. They have to be either an agriculture producer or a small business located in a rural area. Many of our programs, nearly all of them, in fact, you have to be located in a rural area. This one, if you are an ag producer, you could actually be located in an urban area. And our business and industry program that I just spoke about previous is another one that is mostly for rural areas, but with certain projects in the local foods realm, we can sometimes help in urban areas too. So that's important for me to point out. We have both guaranteed loans and grants in this program, but always the purpose is renewable energy or energy efficiency. Here's some examples on the next slide of different types of things that we can do. So Sean mentioned energy costs in these small grocery stores, and actually lighting and the cooling systems are often used through our REAP program to provide grants 25% grants, sometimes a little more in certain circumstances, and guaranteed loans to help put in different, more energy efficient projects. We also can do renewable energy systems, which would be the installation of solar panels, small wind turbines, anaerobic digesters. And we've seen and talked to groups that were local producers of both animals and processors of animals that have been contemplating putting in anaerobic digesters to try and reduce their waste and have another revenue stream. So there are lots of opportunities there as well. This slide is indicating minimum and maximum grant amounts for both renewable energy and energy efficiency improvements. And the numbers are a little different depending on which type of project it is. For our guaranteed loans, the minimum guaranteed loan that we have in the REAP program is $5,000, whereas the maximum is $25 million. If we were doing a guaranteed loan for a business, we cannot cover more than 75% of the cost. So the business would have to come in with 25% from a different program. There can even be combinations where people apply and get both a REAP grant for that, for 25% of the costs, and then they can get a loan to go with it. But in that instance, the two combined cannot exceed 75%. So I know that's a little technical, but I want you to know that there are, as with all government programs, a few limitations and qualifications. The next slide is just an example of a solar installation that was done. It's a relatively small one. They got a $14,000 grant. They saved $3,300 a year. So, you know, that's quite beneficial to them. Next, I want to talk briefly about the Value Added Producer Grant. This grant aids agriculture producers in adding activities related to process and marketing of new projects. The grant amount is a maximum of $250,000 for working capital and $75,000 for planning grants. So there's really two types of grants here. In the event that you've been in business for a period of time and you've already got a proven business, but you're expanding it, you can get working capital. And the working capital has to be for processing of the product, the agriculture commodity that you're growing. And so it can be used for inventory, packaging, marketing, lots of different types of projects. I kept thinking Deb was telling me, hurry up, but it's something else that's ringing in the team. Sorry about that.
There's more people wanting to hear you speak, Tracy.
I see. I kept looking as you got a timer on me somewhere? Sorry. Anyway, so we have the working capital that can help with the processing of the product. It can help for the people that are standing on the line actually doing the processing, canning, whatever that may be. The borrowers that are eligible are independent producers, egg producers, farmer groups, cooperatives, lots of things that are going to line up with what y'all are talking about today. The other thing that you can use that for is to have a feasibility study completed in order to determine if what you're wanting to do actually makes sense in that area. So this is an example of a cooperative that utilized the program in Oregon. It's some egg producers that are now processing and selling finished eggs as a product. So they were awarded a $25,000 value added producer grant for working capital. And they were also able to get a $5,000 grant to go with the project too from the Oregon Food Bank. So that was an exciting project. Next slide, Robbie. This is not a cooperative, but it's very interesting. And I just want to point out that the reason I'm mentioning this, someone got a $49,500 grant. They don't grow your typical commodities. It's not what you would normally think of. They grow herbs and some odd fruits and even some other plants that they use to make syrups for cooking and beverages. So you don't automatically think that it's got to be, you know, the normal commodities you're thinking of. This grant can be used for a lot of different projects. Okay, Robbie, next. Last thing I want to talk about the Rural Business Development Grant, and that's because this grant can be used for just a large variety of things. But it can help businesses. Someone talked earlier about a kitchen incubator, and we help fund kitchen incubators with this program and business incubators. And so your cooperatives and your cooperative members can utilize the facilities that we've already financed to get some of the technical assistance for learning different aspects of their business. Maybe it's for marketing or bookkeeping, any of those types of things. So it can be used indirectly that way. Another way that it can be used, we provide funds to organizations, nonprofits, and like municipalities and counties throughout the country to set up revolving loan funds. And those revolving loan funds can be used, again, for processing, not for agriculture production, but they can be used to make small loans in these instances where someone's getting started and they need $10,000, and they can go to these revolving loan funds and get such type of assistance. Okay, next slide. Actually, we can just pass over this because I think I'm running short on time. So go ahead, Rob, to the next one, Robbie. I mentioned the revolving loan from the Rural Business Development Grants, and there are actually 3 other pools of monies that we help set up that are also for revolving loan funds. So there are all different types of funds that could be in your area. So what you're going to want to do is get a hold of someone at Rural Development who can talk to you about what's available in the county and community that you're looking at. Contact your local rural development office for any additional information. This is just a summary slide because I talked fast and had a lot to cover. That just tells you what all each of those different projects or different programs can use the money for. One more slide. And that's really all that I have on those 4 programs. I don't know how Robbie's going to handle it. The next few slides are about our cooperative development branch, which we have on the line with you, many of our staff from that, including the leader, Jim, and then we have Debbie and Megan and lots of other ones. This is just giving you information I wanted you to have after this program is over so that you can go back and reference it and know all the great work that they do and the project, the different products we have available to help you. Thank you.
Thanks, Tracy. I appreciate it. And that is a quick tour for a lot of programs that we have. But we do also want to recognize that there are other programs throughout the federal family that are available to use for cooperatives and local foods. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Patrick Kelly and Jillian Kaplan and Melissa Nix, and I will let them decide amongst themselves who's going to go first. But they're here to talk to us from Ag Marketing Service, and they are grant specialists in the Ag Marketing Division.
Thanks, Deborah. We've actually already figured out who's going to go in what order, so
All right.
I think we're good to go.
Okay.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Patrick Kelly, and I'm a lead grant specialist with the AMS Grants Division. My colleagues and I are going to be sharing a little bit of information about a few of the programs that we operate, and we are going to be very brief in what we tell you, but you will have contact information for each of the programs that we're going to be speaking about, so you'll be able to reach out to any of us and get in touch with a person and be able to have an in-person conversation if you're interested in learning more. Next slide. So I'm going to start off talking about the programs that we operate under the Local Agriculture Market Program. Tracy already talked about VAPG, so I'm going to be speaking just very briefly about our Farmers Market and Local Food Promotion Program and the Regional Food System Partnership Program. Next slide, please. The purpose of the Farmers Market and Local Food Promotion Program is to increase domestic consumption of and access to locally and regionally produced agricultural products, and to develop new market opportunities for farm and ranch operations serving local markets. There are two, sorry, could you go back real quick? Sorry. There is an application for each of the programs, so you don't apply for both programs at once, just so you're aware of that. Next slide, please. The purpose of the Regional Food System Partnership Program is to support partnerships that bring together public and private resources around developing local and regional food systems and working together to set priorities and common goals for the regional food system by bringing together a variety of stakeholders around the table. So this program pays for the actual work that goes into bringing together various stakeholders and getting them to meet and talk about the regional food system and set those common goals, identify the gaps within the system and how they want to address some of those gaps moving forward. Next slide, please. We do have a variety of resources for the programs that we operate under LAMP. This is just a quick list of them right here. I'm not going to go through each one, but like I said, you're going to have access to this after the presentation today. So you'll be able to check out any of these sites for more information. Next slide, please. But like I said, if you wanted to reach out to us directly and have a conversation about either the Farmers Market and Local Food Promotion Program or the Regional Food System Partnerships Program, these are the email addresses that you can reach out to, and someone will get back to you within 1 business day and set up a conversation. So with that, I'm going to hand it off to my colleague, Jillian, who's going to tell you more about our new Organic Market Development Grant Program.
Hi, everyone. I'm the team lead on the Organic Market Development Grant Program, or OMDG. So I'm going to give you a brief high-level overview of that today. Next slide, please. Okay, so this program is aimed at helping to improve processing and distribution capacity for organic producers and handlers to get more organic products to consumers by supporting the creation of newer expanded markets for domestic organic goods. The focus is on processing capacity, market access, and product development and promotion. There are 3 main project types. So there's market development and promotion projects, which are centered around product development activities to create markets for products, organic products that currently don't have a market, or to expand upon a market. So this project type requires a 50% match of total federal costs. And then we've got the processing capacity expansion projects, which help with aggregation, processing, storage, marketing, and distribution mechanisms for organic commodities in order to create new market paths. And this also has a 50% match requirement of total federal costs. And then our final project type are simplified equipment only projects. So these fund equipment only projects. And there's no match requirement. And again, the whole overall purpose of these project types is to help bring increased consumption over domestic organic goods. All right, next slide, please. So eligible entities for the program could include certified or transitioning organic food producers or handlers, nonprofits, trade associations, tribal governments, state and local governments. Producer and handler applicants must be certified organic or in transition to certification by the time that the awards are issued. And that requirement does not apply to government entities or nonprofits or tribal entities. And here you can also see the duration for each project type and the minimum and maximum award amounts. Next slide. So that's the quick and dirty of it. If you have any questions, you're interested in learning more about the program, please reach out. And now I'm going to hand it over to Melissa Nix.
Awesome. Thank you, Jillian. My name is Melissa Nix, and I am the lead grants management specialist for the Resilient Food Systems Infrastructure Program based out of AMS as well. Next slide, please. The RFSI is intended to serve middle of the supply chain needs for locally or regionally produced food products meant for human consumption, including specialty crops, dairy, grains for human consumption, aquaculture, and other food products. This excludes meat and poultry as well. On May 25th, 2023, AMS awarded up to $420 million in cooperative agreements to each of the U.S. states and territory departments of agriculture, as determined by formula funding. These cooperative agreements will be followed by state plans to develop and administer activities to build resilience across the middle of the supply chain for food crops. Each state will plan, propose, and make subawards in the form of infrastructure grants for projects to expand capacity and infrastructure for the aggregation, processing, manufacturing, storing, transporting, wholesaling, or distribution of targeted local and regional agricultural products. Infrastructure grants have a minimum award of $100,000 and a maximum of $3 million. They also have a match requirement of 50% of the total project costs, with an option of a reduced match of 25% for underserved populations as defined within the program scope and requirements. States may also use up to 20% or $1 million, whichever is less, for state-led supply chain coordination and technical assistance activities. The RFSI has a period of performance of 4 years, starting May 25th, 2023, and ending on May 24th, 2027. Please feel free to contact us with any questions you may have about the RFSI or any of the other programs you heard about today by utilizing the email addresses found within this presentation. This concludes the presentation from the AMS grants, and we thank you so much for having us. So I will pass it on to Deborah.
Okay, thank you. Lots of good programs out there to help increase the availability of local food in this food chain, and cooperatives that have the ability to take advantage of it. Now we want to share one last tidbit before we go to questions. This is a new initiative through USDA Rural Development, and that is the Rural Partners Network. And Nathan Sandwick, who recently joined USDA Rural Development in March, is serving as the community programs liaison to support this network in Wisconsin. And he's going to share a little bit about what they do.
Yes. Hello, everybody. Thanks for this opportunity to put the spotlight on this new initiative, Rural Partners Network. It's an honor to be here. It was valuable for me to soak up and learn a lot of what was already mentioned earlier. Yes, Rural Partners Network is a fairly new White House initiative. It's a whole of government approach. It's an association of federal agencies, staff, and programs. And in collaboration, 24 of these federal, well, it's a growing number actually, but more than 20 federal agencies and regional commissions are coordinated through the Rural Prosperity Interagency Policy Council, co-led by the White House Domestic Policy Council and USDA. And Rural Partners Network puts federal staff on the ground in the form of community liaisons like myself, who are hired to work at USDA Rural Development. So USDA Rural Development is largely responsible for staffing the initiative, but it is a whole of government approach. And if I could just advance to the next slide, I'll touch on that a little more. The stated purpose here, as you can see, enhance equitable rural prosperity through local job creation, infrastructure development, and community improvement. Another phrase I've seen written and occasionally use myself is transform the way federal agencies work with communities. There's a vision statement that I refer to from time to time, and that just thinking broad vision, one of the hopes is America's rural places successfully leverage economic recovery resources, improve social, economic, and health outcomes, and build lasting public and private and philanthropic relationships. How we do this through both a local place-based support for and also through a broader whole of government approach. And actually the next slide, I'll kind of get into that a little bit, the place-based approach. So where is Rural Partners Network active? I just want you all to keep in mind this is active in 10 states plus plus Puerto Rico currently. And so that just means that just be aware there are 40 states where we do not have community liaisons actively involved in place-based programming. There are also within the state participating community networks. So in Wisconsin, for example, it's not the entire state where I work. We have 5 distinct community networks that have been identified. And generally speaking, those combined include 13 of Wisconsin's 72 counties. So just be aware that it is kind of focused geographically in terms of where we have staff on task trying to get to know what the community needs are so that we can better connect them to resources that might be available through various federal agencies. That's still 13 counties, I would say, is a lot of ground to cover for the few community liaisons we have here in Wisconsin. So in terms of getting involved in really seeking to understand what the communities are trying to achieve, that's a fair amount to cover, actually. So there's a place-based approach that I mentioned that's an in-depth strategy where we want to learn what's going on in those communities so that we can figure out how to best support that. And the hope is that we've got a breadth strategy about the lessons that we learn through that effort. We hope to share and apply more broadly. I'll skip the how the communities were selected. In a nutshell, there are places that were historically have not been leveraging or accessing the federal resources for which they may be eligible to some extent. There were other variety of factors that went into the selection. And in Wisconsin, at least I know the community networks then were also from those kernels of places that were identified. They were also expanded based on basically the recommendation of the communities that were identified originally. So in that sense, the places themselves are sort of self-defined. The next slide just is really an appreciation of all the interagency partners that are involved in this effort. You can see a whole lot of logos here. Like I say, this slide is actually old. This is there's a growing number of agencies involved, but none of this would be possible without the attention of the rural desk officers that are assigned from these agencies to help out in the ways that they can, to make sure that their agencies are responsive as best they can to the needs of these communities that we're working with. So, like I say, without this whole of government effort, really, there'd be very little for me to talk about in the community. Well, there actually would still be a lot just within the USDA rural development programs alone, which of course, are my colleagues. We're staffed by that agency, but we know there's so much more. And so this is one of the things that's unique about this initiative. The next slide is where we're going to spend a little time, but not much, because I know we're probably getting close to wrapping up and I'm the last one here. So there is here, as you can see for yourself, just a handful of roles that we as community liaisons can play in our communities. Resources here, that's described as matchmaking. And we help them leverage partnerships as best as possible. We help as best we can develop long-term capacity building experience locally for maybe bigger investments to come. And I do, if I have time, I want to share at least a few examples of some of the projects that may interest the folks in this group. Okay, I see a yes, please.
Yes.
All right.
Yes.
All right, thanks a lot. One that comes to mind, based on my experience here in Wisconsin, is that the leaders of the Menominee Tribal Nation in Wisconsin, which is one of our community networks, some of the leaders have expressed an interest in creating an indigenous cooperative to advance some of the shared hopes related to agriculture and food systems. There is a food systems focus there. Leaders do see that food is good as medicine, and there is a strong hope to build a more resilient food supply chain. I won't claim to know more than I do about all the ideas that they have along those lines, but because they expressed interest in an indigenous cooperative along those lines, one of the things that we were able to do as community liaisons was really engage some technical assistance. As you see here, one of the things, provide technical assistance. Well, we don't pretend to be the experts ourselves all the time. In this case, we engaged Margaret Bow from USDA Rural Development, who's here today. Hello, Margaret. And Kristen Ford from University of Wisconsin Center for Cooperatives to present information to that group and to present resources for cooperative development that may be of interest, and did that at one of our regular Rural Partners Network stakeholder meetings with that community network. So that was, I think, something that was actually really well received. There were a lot of attendees for that webinar, and I think they got information. There was good discussion. Another project, again, just kind of shamelessly plugging those that are happening in Wisconsin, Western Wisconsin, the other side of the state, there is the potential formation of the Red Cedar Cooperative, which would be in the food supply arena. This actually, the hope for this originated with a farmer-led watershed group active around the Red Cedar watershed. And they've been discussing it actually for a couple of years. More recently, they've gotten help from Grasslands 2.0, which is another broad collaborative effort spearheaded in large part by the University of Wisconsin as well, but really organized through these local hubs. And there's a local hub that is active in that region. And so they're engaged in the planning process for creating that cooperative in coordination with the local farmer-led watershed group. And that would be a nice, I won't get into all the details there, I guess, in the interest of time, but it'd be exciting to see that development. And it wouldn't surprise me if some of the folks on the call here may know more about that particular one than I do. If I get questions on that, feel free to chime in and answer them for me. But that's, like I say, been a 2-year discussion, and some of these things do take time. In general, I wanted to just speak briefly on some of the advantages to cooperatives that come to mind. This is maybe briefly echoing some of the things that you've all touched on already, that other presenters have touched on already. But well, in this context, Wisconsin is an important food producer with a history of producer cooperatives and others, and a wide variety of farms of different sizes, different types, different focuses, different cultures even, really. And producers are busy producing food, generally speaking. And so we recognize that cooperatives have the capacity to facilitate some of the marketing arrangements that would really serve them well in ways to do that. That would maybe be a distraction if they had to do it all themselves. Cooperatives often do profiles, on their producers, on their producer members, and they help with that storytelling. And one of the things we've seen here in Wisconsin anyway, and probably elsewhere, is that especially in the wake of the COVID pandemic, the social media connecting farms to buyers, those types of channels for making those connections has really expanded, and cooperatives have played a great role in that development as well, building those stronger social media connections. We recognize that co-ops can help overcome some of the limitations of selling, say, like halves and quarters and wholes of steer at a time, and things. And we've got examples of distributors here that are in some cases already working on that and looking to expand their operations. So we know of one example of that. I won't get into it, but from a general community development perspective too, which is really my background, I do see that cooperative ventures can often address rural community needs and do so while generating additional benefits as well. So it's some rural communities seem to be waiting for for-profit business to meet some local demands that they all share. We miss our hardware store, we miss our local grocery, or whatever it might be, and I think that in many of those cases, if that's what they're waiting for, they may be waiting for a very long time. And wouldn't say cooperative development is easy or that it can work in every such case. I do think that the cooperative model can often be a good option for them to explore when they as a community know what they really need. It's going to really improve their local community. So that's something that I'm always looking for, I guess, opportunities to encourage consideration, at least of that model. Lastly, cooperative development can be supported by a wide array of partners and resources from various sources. Just a few that come to mind: NRCS, the Food and Nutrition Services, of course, USDA, Rural Development, universities. Some of those are just among the cast of characters that are relevant to the examples I've already shared. And we hope that, Rural Partners Network can help connect the dots in those cases and just let, connect people to folks who know more about cooperative development than I do, for example, and have resources to share. So there are, if folks are interested, there's also I've got 4 projects from other states that I'm aware of that have to do with food and agriculture. But in the interest of time, I might just hold off on those and just settle for the examples that specifically relate to cooperatives at this time. And I really appreciate the time for Q&A in a setting like this, so I don't want to cut into that too much. So with that, I guess my understanding is that questions and answers can apply to all of the presenters. Is that correct?
That is correct. We're
Okay.
going to take a few minutes, and I do realize that we are running over, so we will continue to record so that if you have to take off and have a similar question, or you hear a question, you want to hear the answer, but you're not able to stay, that will be covered on the recording. So when we send that out, you'll have the opportunity to hear the answer in response to that. I do want to say thank you to all of our presenters today. You've done a fantastic job. Lots of information thrown at everybody. Hopefully when you get a chance to see the recording or get a copy of the slide deck, you'll have the resources available to jump in with any local food project that comes to mind, and hopefully the co-op model. Hopefully we've made the case for the co-op model, and that you'll remember that people are what make co-ops happen. And so with that, I'm gonna open it up. If you have any questions, go ahead and feel free to unmute yourself and ask. If you have a particular presenter that you want to direct it to, let them know. Otherwise, we'll go ahead. Shar?
Hi, I've got a question for Nathan. How often do the Rural Partners Network, how often do you meet? You had mentioned that you meet, but how often is that? Is that a case-by-case basis? And do you identify which agencies it may be applicable to? How is that process established?
Well, in the interest of time, I maybe will just share. It varies a little bit, even in Wisconsin, among the 5 community networks that we have here. But I gather that you're probably referring to our general sort of stakeholder meetings that we try to convene in each of these community networks. And in the case of Menominee, the Menominee Tribal Nation, which I mentioned, there we typically meet monthly and virtually at that, with the occasional in-person meeting, depending on the circumstances. And we've had a really successful, in-person meeting there as recently as May. But in general, we try to at least have that general sort of updates type meeting on resources, current and forthcoming, about monthly. There are other ways for us to communicate with those groups. But I think that's probably more often in 4 of our 5 community networks. That's pretty much how we do it. There's a lot of correspondence, of course, that happens outside of those meetings as well, as you can imagine. But as far as regular meetings goes, does that answer your question?
You're on mute.
Sorry about that. And when somebody brings a project to you, how do you identify which agencies you're going to connect with? And does USDA do that on behalf? Or how does that work?
Yeah, that also varies. In some cases, if I happen to know of a program that would pretty obviously be a good fit, which is rarely the case with me being new to federal government, as was mentioned. I just started at the end of March, but so I'm still getting to know some of those programs. But I will often see what we can find. Often confer with some colleagues, and when it has happened several times that I'll basically notify some colleagues in the national office of the project need, and they can make some suggestions for me about which agencies to pursue. And then this is sometimes where having those rural desk officers in the other agencies comes in extremely handy. Is I've got the contact information for some person in those agencies that I can call and let them know that I'm a community liaison working on this, and I was told that your agency might have something that would fit this situation. And sometimes, though, after bridging that connection, we find out that actually it's maybe the one that we had in mind, the program that we had in mind might not be a good fit for the situation, and we'll continue that search again until we finally can confidently answer that maybe federal agencies don't have something that would quite fit, and then we'll make a note of it and count that as sort of contributing to the lessons learned here. If we're getting a lot of demand for certain types of projects that there just isn't a program for yet, I see it as my job to keep track of that kind of information too, because that is exactly the kind of thing we can learn from and figure out how to address in future years too. The other thing is that not all projects come to me as really ready to shop out. So sometimes it's a very loose idea of a project, and it's not really quite ready to shop out. And so that's where there's been some cases where we recognize that, okay, what they clearly need here is technical assistance. And if that's the case, we'll start to look for somebody who can offer the technical assistance that they could benefit from. So it's very case by case, I guess.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mhm.
Any other questions? Is Dr. Blassie still on? Don't see him. Okay, with that, I guess we will thank you for your attendance and your attention. Special thank you to all of the presenters and Dr. Carmen and Gray Harris, our lead local foods folks out there. And please don't forget to check in again with our next webinar in the series is childcare, and that will be on Friday, August 11th at the same time from 2 to 3:30. And if the links are in the chat, if you didn't get them, or hopefully you saved your invitation to this one and the links were in there. They'll be going out again, but just wanted to make sure that you have that on your radar if you're interested in co-ops. There's that, and then the following month there will be one on oh shoot, I've lost my list. Margaret. I'll pass it to Margaret. Rural economy and investment co-ops. There we go. Real estate investment co-ops is in September, and then follow that up with the rural economy.
Yeah, Friday,
So.
September 15th for the rural investment cooperatives.
And October is the equitable ecosystems, cooperative ecosystems.
There you go. So with that, I wish you all a wonderful weekend. Enjoy the rest of your Friday, and hope to see you in August, if not before.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, speakers.